Hello students, welcome to NCERT Solutions given by Vedantu, and this is your biology master teacher Ashwini, and here, as you know, this is the channel where we discuss the NCERT solutions of all the chapters given in our textbook. And today here I am to discuss the NCERT questions of the chapter Breathing and Exchange of Gases. Okay, the first question from the chapter is define vital capacity. What is its significance? So, in this chapter, we have to learn about different respiratory volumes and respiratory capacities, and it's very important. So, the first question, define vital capacity. So, what is vital capacity? It is the maximum, right? It is the maximum amount or volume of air a person can inspire after a forced expiration, or it can also be defined as the maximum volume or amount of air a person can expire after a forced inspiration. Okay, so what is meant by vital capacity? It is the maximum volume or amount of air a person can inspire after a forced expiration, or it can also be said as it is a maximum volume of air or the amount of air a person can expire after a forced inspiration. And here is the question, what is its significance? So what is the importance or significance of vital capacity? Actually, vital capacity enables us to exhale out the foul air that is present inside our lungs, and it also enables us to take in maximum amount of fresh air. So there are two significance of vital capacity, that is to expire out maximum amount of foul air, and next is it enables us to inspire maximum amount of fresh air. Okay, that's all. State the volume of air remaining in the lungs after a normal breathing. That means after a normal breathing or a normal respiration, there always remains a small volume of air in our lungs. So what it is called? It is called as functional residual capacity, or FRC. Okay, it is called as functional residual capacity. So functional residual capacity, or FRC, is the sum of ERV plus RV. That means functional residual capacity is the sum or totality of expiratory reserve volume and residual volume. So for a healthy human, it is about 2500 to 3000 milliliter. Okay, so here is the question. Diffusion of gases occurs in the alveolar region only and not in the other parts of respiratory system. Why? That means the gas exchange, that is diffusion of gases, takes place in the alveolar region. That means alveolar region is the primary site of diffusion. Okay, primary site of diffusion. Not other parts can be said as the primary site for gas exchange or diffusion. Why? That is the question. Okay, so as we know, when we breathe in, the oxygen rich air will pass through our nose to the alveoli that is present in the lungs. That means the alveoli will be supplied with oxygen rich air, and the tissues will release carbon dioxide into the blood. This deoxygenated blood, that means carbon dioxide rich blood, reaches the blood capillaries surrounding the alveoli. As we know, the alveoli are surrounded by blood capillaries, right? The alveoli is surrounded by blood capillaries. So these blood capillaries will carry carbon dioxide rich blood, that is the deoxygenated blood. And inside the alveoli, we can see oxygen rich air, right? So this oxygen has to reach the blood and the carbon dioxide should be released into the alveoli. That is primary gas exchange. So at this time, the oxygen from the alveoli will get diffused or transported into the blood present in the blood capillaries, and the carbon dioxide from the blood will get diffused to the alveoli, right? This is gas exchange. So the primary exchange takes place in the alveolar region, not in other parts of the respiratory system. And this gas exchange always takes place by diffusion only. Okay, it always takes place through diffusion only. Because the thickness of this diffusion membrane is very, very, very thin, right? So the diffusion takes place so easily. What are the major transport mechanisms for carbon dioxide? Explain. So in case of oxygen, we know 97% of the oxygen combines with the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. So majority of the oxygen is transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin. But in case of carbon dioxide, it is slightly different, right? So there are three major transport mechanisms for carbon dioxide. So 7% of the carbon dioxide gets dissolved in the plasma. Okay, 7% of the carbon dioxide gets dissolved in the plasma. And almost 25% of the carbon dioxide will combine with hemoglobin to form carbaminohemoglobin. Okay, to form carbaminohemoglobin. So in case of oxygen, 97% of the oxygen is transported as oxyhemoglobin. But in case of carbon dioxide, only 25% of it is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. Okay, and majority, that means almost 70% of the carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonate ions. Okay, in the form of bicarbonates. So majority carbon dioxide is transported from the tissues to the lungs in the form of bicarbonates. What will be the PO2 and PCO2? That means partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the atmospheric air compared to those in the alveolar air. So we know one thing. For the gas molecules to move, to get diffused means it always takes place from higher partial pressure to lower partial pressure. So we know that the alveolar air, that means the carbon dioxide rich air, should get expelled out. That means it should move from our lungs to the atmosphere. So the partial pressure of carbon dioxide should be higher in the lungs and lower in the atmosphere. Then only it will get expelled out. And in case of oxygen, the oxygen rich air should enter from the atmosphere to our lungs. So in order to take place, that means the partial pressure of oxygen should be higher in the atmosphere and lower in the alveoli. Then only this movement will take place so easily. Okay. So the answer of the question is option B. PO2 is higher in the atmosphere and PCO2 is lesser in the atmosphere. Okay. So you have to read the question twice. Then only you will understand. The question is related to the atmospheric air. Okay. So in the atmosphere, PO2, that means partial pressure of oxygen is higher and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is very, very lower. Okay. Then only the exchange of gas takes place. Okay. Carbon dioxide rich air will get expelled from lungs to the atmosphere and also the oxygen rich air will enter into the lungs from atmosphere. Okay. So the sixth question is, explain the process of inspiration under normal conditions. So we have to explain what all events takes place during the process of inspiration, right? So what is meant by inspiration? The process of taking in atmospheric air into our lungs. That is referred to as inspiration, right? It is a process of taking in air. It can also be referred as inhaling, right? So what all events takes place during the process of inspiration? So during inspiration, the external intercostal muscles, that means the muscles that is present in between our ribs, right? The external intercostal muscles will get contracted. Okay, intercostal muscles contracts. As a result, ribs and sternum gets raised. Okay, ribs and sternum gets raised. So you can try it. When you inspire, just observe what changes takes place in your thoracic cavity. So you can see when you inhale or inspire the air, your ribs and sternum gets raised. It gets lifted up. Okay, and the diaphragm gets contracted. We know the shape of the diaphragm is dome. It is dome shape. It is like this only. And during inspiration, it gets contracted. That means it becomes flat. So the diaphragm becomes flat. As a result, the thoracic cavity's volume increases. If the thoracic cavity's volume increases, that means a pulmonary cavity's volume also gets increased. That means the lungs volume also gets increased. Okay. So thoracic cavity's volume gets increased, right? And as a result, the volume of the lungs also gets increased. So at this time, the air gets entered into our lungs. And what about the pressure? So we know gas molecules always move from higher pressure to a region of lower pressure. So the atmospheric pressure is higher and the pulmonary pressure, the pressure of the lungs, is lower. So the air easily gets entered into our lungs. Okay. So here pulmonary pressure is lower and atmospheric pressure is higher. So the air enters into our lungs. So these are the events that takes place during the process of inspiration. How is respiration regulated? So we have studied 4 different regulation for the respiration, right? So what are the 4 regulations? Number 1 is the respiratory rhythm center, right? The respiratory rhythm center is present in the medulla oblongata region of our brain. So what is the function of respiratory rhythm center? It is responsible for the primary regulation of respiration. Okay, it is responsible for the primary regulation of respiration. That means it is involved in regulating a normal inspiratory and expiratory rate. Okay. Yes, so it is responsible or it is involved in maintaining or regulating the normal respiratory rhythm. Normal respiratory rhythm in the sense it controls or it maintains or it regulates our inspiration and expiration. Okay. And next one is the pneumotaxic center. Okay, pneumotaxic center. Pneumotaxic center reduces the duration of respiration. Pneumotaxic center reduces the duration of respiration. That means if the duration of the respiration is reduced, decreased, the number of breathing, the number of respiration we do at a time increases. Okay, the number of breathing increases. Thus, if the number of breathing increases, it results in the increase of respiratory rate. That means our respiration rate also increases with it. Yes, so it reduces duration of respiration. It reduces the duration of respiration and the number of breathing increases. Thus, the respiration rate also increases. Next is chemosensitive area. Third one is chemosensitive area. The chemosensitive area consists of several chemoreceptors. Okay, these chemoreceptors have the ability to sense various chemicals present in our body. For example, if the concentration of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions increases within our body, then the chemosensitive area will recognize it, or the receptors will recognize it, and they'll send an information to the respiratory rhythm center in order to eliminate the excess chemicals present in our body. Okay, and the fourth one is aortic arch and carotid artery. Aortic arch and carotid artery. So these blood vessels, that means aortic arch and carotid artery, also contains several chemoreceptors which can sense the chemicals like carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions. If the concentration of these chemicals are very much higher, that means they'll eliminate the excess amount of these chemicals. Okay. Yes. So this is how the respiration is regulated in our body. There are 4 V's. Number 1 is respiratory rhythm center. It is present in the medulla region. Okay, it is present in the medulla region of our brain. And next one is pneumotaxic center. Third one is chemosensitive area, and the fourth one is aortic arch and carotid artery. What is the effect of PCO2? PCO2 means partial pressure of carbon dioxide on oxygen transport. So what is the effect of the partial pressure of carbon dioxide for the oxygen transportation, right? Okay, so there are 2 different cases. Number 1 is in the alveoli. Okay, in the alveolar region. So in the alveolar region, gas exchange takes place. That means the oxygen will get into the blood, in the blood capillaries, and it will combine or it will bind with the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. So for this process, that means for the oxygen to bind with the hemoglobin and form oxyhemoglobin, the partial pressure of oxygen should be high and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide should be very much low. Okay, then only this oxyhemoglobin formation takes place, and this process is called association. This process is called association and it takes place in alveolar region. So in the alveolar region, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less, then only oxyhemoglobin formation takes place. Okay, and second case is in the tissues. Okay, in the tissues, the oxyhemoglobin will break, right? It will split in the form that the oxyhemoglobin separates or it will get dissociated. Then only the oxygen can be released into the tissues, right? So in the tissues, the oxyhemoglobin dissociates to form hemoglobin and oxygen molecules. These oxygen molecules are released onto the tissues, and this process is called dissociation. Okay, dissociation. So if the dissociation has to take place, that means the hemoglobin should release oxygen molecules in the tissues. If this has to take place, then the partial pressure of oxygen should be very much less, and also the partial pressure of carbon dioxide should be high. So in the tissues, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is higher, then only dissociation takes place, and in the alveolar region, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is lesser, then only association takes place. So this is the effect of partial pressure of carbon dioxide on oxygen transporting. What happens to the respiratory process in a man going up a hill? So as we go up higher, okay, as we go up higher, the altitude increases. So when the altitude increases, the concentration of oxygen molecules in the atmosphere decreases, right? The concentration of oxygen decreases. So there is an inadequate supply of oxygen to our body. Even it is not sufficient to meet the needs or demand of our body. Okay. So our body needs more amount of oxygen. For that, we will start breathing rapidly. That means the respiration rate gets increased. So when the respiration rate gets increased, when we start breathing rapidly, then a heartbeat also gets increased. Okay. A heartbeat also gets increased because the heart will try to pump more blood into the tissues with oxygen, then only the oxygen reaches the tissues so that the tissues can produce more amount of energy. Okay, so this is what happens when a man goes up a hill. What is the site of gaseous exchange in an insect? So we know insects consist of a network of tubes called tracheal system for their respiration, right? So insects, for example, like cockroach, they have network of tubes in their body, and this tubular system is called as tracheal tubes. Okay, tracheal tubes. And also in the either side of their body, there are minute openings or pores called spiracles. So through these spiracles, gas exchange occurs. That means from the atmosphere, the oxygen molecules enters into the tracheal tubes through these spiracles. Okay, and from the tracheal tubes, they'll get diffused into the tissues. From the tissues, the carbon dioxide enters into the tracheal system and passes out into the atmosphere through these spiracles. So this is how the gas exchange takes place in an insect. Okay, so you have to remember two terms here. Number one is insect consists of a tubular system called a tracheal system, and also they consist of minute pores or openings in either side of their body called as spiracles. So through these spiracles, the gas exchange occurs. That means the oxygen from the atmosphere enters into the tracheal system through these spiracles, and from the tracheal system, the oxygen molecules diffuses into the tissues. The tissues will release carbon dioxide into the tracheal tubes. The tracheal tubes carries into the spiracles, and through spiracles, the carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. Okay, this is how gas exchange takes place in an insect. Define oxygen dissociation curve. Can you suggest any reason for sigmoidal pattern? So what is meant by oxygen dissociation curve? It is a graph only. Okay, it is a graph attained while plotting the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen against partial pressure of oxygen. Okay, it is just a graph we obtain when we plot the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen, that is in the y-axis, against the partial pressure of oxygen, that is in the x-axis. So we'll get a S-shaped curve, okay, or a sigmoidal pattern curve is obtained in this graph. Why it is in S shape? That is the second question. What is the reason? Okay, so at first, the formation of oxyhemoglobin increases rapidly. Okay, as you can see here, the formation of oxyhemoglobin increases very fast or rapidly at its initial stage. That is because a hemoglobin can hold 4 oxygen molecules. Okay, so when a hemoglobin binds with the first oxygen molecule, then its affinity increases. So the oxyhemoglobin formation increases rapidly. Okay, but when all the hemoglobin are occupied with the oxygen molecules, that is, there is no further hemoglobin molecules are available to bind with the oxygen molecules to form oxyhemoglobin. At this stage, the graph was constant. The graph was stable because there is no leftover hemoglobin. Okay, so excess oxygen is there, but there is not enough hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. So at that time, the graph is stable or is constant. So that is why here we obtain a sigmoidal pattern or a S-shaped curve. The question is, have you heard about hypoxia? Try to gather information about it and discuss with your friends. So what is hypoxia? So hypoxia is a pathological condition. Okay, hypoxia is a pathological condition in which a body, maybe the whole body or maybe body parts, are supplied with not sufficient amount of oxygen. Okay, that means the decreased oxygen supply to the lungs is termed as hypoxia. So it is a pathological condition in which a body is not supplied with sufficient amount of oxygen. With sufficient amount of oxygen. Okay. So the symptoms of hypoxia is shortness of breath, rapid breathing, rapid heartbeat, confusion. These are the major symptoms of hypoxia, and there are different types of hypoxia. Okay. There are different types of hypoxia. One is hypoxemic hypoxia. Hypoxemic hypoxia. This is due to low partial pressure of oxygen. Okay, so hypoxemic hypoxia is caused due to low partial pressure of oxygen. And next one is anemic hypoxia. Anemic hypoxia is due to low hemoglobin content in the blood. And third one is histotoxic hypoxia. Histotoxic hypoxia is because there is an inability in our tissues. That means the tissues cannot utilize sufficient oxygen molecules. Okay. Tissues cannot use or utilize oxygen molecules. So these are the different types of hypoxia. And what are the reasons, causes of hypoxia? When we go to higher altitudes, then there is low PO2. That means there is low concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere. It may lead to hypoxia. And if we have any heart problems like tachycardia, it will also lead to hypoxia. And if we have any respiratory disorders like asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, it may lead to hypoxia. And also low hemoglobin in our blood also leads to hypoxia. Okay, these are the reasons of hypoxia. So the question is, distinguish between number 1, IRV and ERV. Number 2, inspiratory capacity and expiratory capacity. Number 3, vital capacity and total lung capacity. Okay, so this question comes from the topic respiratory volumes and capacities, and that is one of the most important topics in our chapter. Okay, first one, IRV and ERV. IRV, it is inspiratory reserve volume, and ERV, expiratory reserve volume. So reserve volume means additional volume. Inspiratory reserve volume defines that it is the additional volume of air a person can inspire or take in by a forceful inspiration. Okay, so through a normal respiration, we inhale or we inspire an X amount of air into our lungs, right? But if it is a forceful inspiration, an additional Y amount of air also enters into our lungs, and that is called inspiratory reserve volume. For an healthy individual, it is about 2500 to 3000 milliliter. Next one is ERV. expiratory reserve volume. Okay, so through a forceful expiration, how much additional volume of air a person can expel out, expire, okay, breathe out. That is termed as expiratory reserve volume, and for an healthy individual, it is about 1000 to 1100 milliliter. Okay. The question B, difference between inspiratory capacity and expiratory capacity, that is IC and EC. Okay. So what is inspiratory capacity? It is the total volume of air a person can inspire after a normal expiration. So normally you have breathed out, right? You have released air out. After that, what is the total volume of air you can breathe in? That is inspiratory capacity. So IC is equal to TV plus IRV. That means tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume gives inspiratory capacity. Next is EC, expiratory capacity. Okay, it is a total volume of air a person can expire out, expel out, breathe out after a normal inspiration. So normally you will inspire. So some amount of air enters into your lungs, right? And after that you will expire. So after a normal inspiration, how much volume of air is expelled out is termed as expiratory capacity. It is EC is equal to tidal volume plus expiratory reserve volume, TV plus ERV. And the third question is difference between VC and TLC. VC is vital capacity and TLC is total lung capacity. Okay. So what is VC? VC can be defined in two ways. Okay. Number one is it is a maximum volume of air a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. Okay, after a forced expiration, you have expelled out all the air in your lungs. Okay, after that, how much maximum volume of air you can breathe in or inspire is termed as vital capacity. It can also be defined as it is the maximum volume of air a person can breathe out after a forced inspiration. Okay, so you have taken in maximum volume of air into your lungs, and after that you are going to breathe out. Okay, so the maximum volume of air you can breathe out after the forced inspiration is termed as vital capacity. Okay. Next one is TLC, that is total lung capacity. That means it is a total volume of air that remains in your lungs, that is accommodated in the lungs at the end of forced inspiration. You have taken the maximum amount of air, the maximum volume of air into your lungs. Okay. So our lungs is like a balloon. It is filled with air, right? So after the forced inspiration, what is the total volume of air that is accommodated in your lungs? That is termed as TLC, total lung capacity. Okay? Yes. What is tidal volume? Find out the tidal volume. That means the approximate value for a healthy human in an hour. Okay. So what is meant by tidal volume? It is the volume of air that is inspired or expired during a normal respiration. Okay, during a normal respiration, what is the amount or volume of air that you have taken in, and what is the amount of air that you have breathed out? This is what we call as tidal volume. So tidal volume or TV, it is defined as the volume of air inspired or expired during a normal respiration. Okay, normal respiration. For an healthy individual, it is about 6,000 to 8,000 milliliter in a minute. So here, next question is that we have to calculate the tidal volume of a normal human or a healthy human in 1 hour, right? So it will be 6,000 to 8,000 milliliter into 60 minutes. That means the TV is equal to 3.6 into 10 raised to 5 milliliter to 4.8 into 10 raised to 5 milliliter in an hour or in 60 minutes. That's all for today. So this is the solution of this question. See you in the next class. Like, share and subscribe. Till then, bye-bye.